Hello. Well, this is an ad hoc video. I haven't done many in the ideas and beliefs category recently. Black Lives Matter. Well, the very term is racist in itself. It escalates black lives above other lives. And it also is racist that it doesn't support anyone other than black lives. It doesn't say Chinese lives or Asian lives, it says black lives. It's a bit like the ownership of the N-word. If it's offensive, Casby, there. If it's offensive to one group, then it should not be used by that group either, because they find it offensive. They can't own a word. They can't take back a word. I find that there's an awful lot of racism that is allowed to happen because it's racism from black people. And no one wants to say anything or do anything. I tried reporting racism against me recently and the police didn't want to know. And I do feel that racism is racism. It should work in all directions, not just against black people. Black lives do not matter any more than white lives or Chinese lives or Asian lives. All lives matter. The fact there's a segregation is only conspiring to enhance the racism. The fact that the BAME community want to be treated differently is encouraging racism in itself. They shouldn't want to be treated differently, they should want to be treated the same as others. There should be no special treatment of anyone. Allowances should be made for disabilities and things like that. That are, something that inhibits your growth or your access, but your skin colour doesn't inhibit anything. Not unless you make it inhibit things. It's the way you treat your children is the way they treat their children. For instance, there's all this BAME, Black Lives Matter, BLM hashtags going on this year because COVID is apparently affecting the BAME community more than others. And no one's actually saying the real world things. You go out in the real world and most of the people not wearing masks are from the BAME community. Most of the people not respecting social distancing are from the BAME community. You go onto the trains, you go onto the buses, most of the people disrespecting the rules are the BAME community. So the fact that they're getting affected more by COVID-19 than other groups is mainly down to their own disrespect of the rules. I have overheard black people and people in the BAME community outside my flat saying they don't think this COVID is anything serious, they're not going to respect the rules, they're not going to respect social distancing, they're not going to respect, staying at home. They don't think it's a problem, and yet their attitude, I believe the BAME community are the ones that are spreading the virus the most because of their actions or inactions. So why we should segregate the BAME community and say black lives do matter and treat them differently and special, I do not know. When did racism turn in favour of black people? Racism should not be tolerated at all, and yet it's tolerated black on white. The police don't do anything, they don't even take it seriously. And just because people are in public positions, that doesn't mean they're not racist. And yet the police don't care. I don't know. Maybe I should, I don't know, man. Is that better? That's a bit better, isn't it? I don't condone racism in any form. And things like only black people can use the N-word. No. If you're offended by it, you shouldn't be using it. Otherwise, how do you prove you're offended by it? So I think that black people using the N-word should be arrested and charged with racism. It would only be fair. They can't turn round and make rules up just for their own sake. Black lives do matter, but then so do all lives. I don't like campaigns that segregate on skin colour or race, because that is condoning racism. All Lives Matter would be a campaign I could get that. All this Black Lives Matter taking the knee. No one should be forced into doing something just because everyone else is doing it. That's bullying. And booing people for not doing it and chastising people for not doing it. I've got cats moving around in the background. Should not happen in a free society. If you want to be part of a free society, you accept all the responsibilities that come with being in a free society. And in a free society, you have the responsibility and the right to be offended. You shouldn't go out of your way to say offensive stuff, but you shouldn't be stopped from saying things that a minority of people will find offensive. I'm not saying that the majority should win all the time, because the minority in some tongue-tied, I need more coffee. The majority should not win all the time, but the minority need to be protected, but not on skin colour. I think it's time to get over it now, boys. 200 years after the abolition of slavery, it's time to get over it. Let's face it, if things had developed differently and Africa was the European style state that had expanded and improved and invented things, and the Europeans were the less prominent people, the Africans would have probably enslaved the Europeans and done exactly what the Europeans did to the Africans. And indeed what the Africans did to themselves. Most of the slavery that happened in Africa was inter-African. There was a small percentage that got exported to the Americas, mainly South America, but it's only the North American ones that get remembered. Most of them went to Argentina and Brazil. That's why there's an awful lot of Portuguese-speaking peoples down there. So people do things that they think are okay at the time. They shouldn't be chastised for it 200, 300, 400 years later for making money on the backs of slaves. They made money legally. If it was to do with slavery, so be it. It might be wrong now, but it wasn't then. I'm not saying slavery is justified, but I am saying you can't go back in time and arrest people for things that they didn't realise was wrong, or at least was illegal. Everyone was smoking at one time. If you go back to the early part of the 20th century, nearly everyone was smoking. And yet to see a smoker now is unusual. A proper tobacco smoker is unusual. And yet we don't chastise our grandparents for smoking. It's not like, well, they should have known better. So Why do we do that with slavery? People do what they think is right at the time. If they're not breaking the law at the time, then they're doing things to earn money. If it's buying and selling humans, which at the time Africans were seen as a lower class of animal, they weren't seen as humans by a lot of Europeans. I know that's wrong now, but there's a lot of evidence that suggests there is an intelligence per genus. Like the Chinese and Asians are more intelligent than most people on the planet. They've invented stuff thousands of years before we did in the West. And I haven't got a problem with that. I've had friends that are Chinese or Chinese origin, and they are some of the most intelligent people I've come across. There are also some clever Africans that I've known. It's similar everywhere. You can go to any population and you'll find clever people and the not so clever people. People that come up with ideas and people that do the ideas. But segregating, I mean, it's like Black Lives Matter campaign. They've got a list of 100 black persons in history, and it's a total fabricated list of key achievers that have been overlooked because of their skin colour. They haven't been overlooked. There's no evidence for a lot of the stuff that they say on this Black Lives Matter list. I mean, the nurse that was Mary Seacole, I remember seeing on History Debunked, and I read up about Mary Seacole as well. There's differing stories about Mary Seacole. Some say she was the original nurse that Florence Nightingale took credit for. Some say she ran just a local bar or restaurant, sort of a cafe style thing, and would look after a few people there that was wounded but couldn't get into the local hospital run by Florence Nightingale. There's no evidence to suggest that she came up with any of these nursing things that we take for granted now and are attributed to Florence Nightingale. Admittedly, I don't think Florence Nightingale herself came up with everything, because it's like Edison. He's accredited with inventing hundreds of ideas and patents all over the place, and yet very few of the ideas and patents that were under his name were actually created or invented directly by him. He had a team of lab staff that he would direct, and he would advise what he wants done, and they would go and do it. Like the light bulb, like the telephone, like the gramophone, you know, all sorts of things. So this Black Lives Matter campaign, hopefully in 2021, will stop, because people will realise that, well, by now they should realise that it's not only black lives that matter. All lives matter, especially under the COVID days. And we shouldn't have campaigns that segregate one people away from another based on skin colour. Hopefully 2021 will see the BAME community actually not interrogated but examined for how they're treating the COVID situation. Because in the real world, if you go out in the real world, you will see the BAME community are the ones that are breaking the regulations the most. I'm not saying non-BAME community members don't break the law or don't break the rules, but the ones that break the rules more often are in the BAME community. From what I have personally seen on buses and tubes, not at the entrances to the tube stations, if you go on the platforms, you go on the trains, No one's enforcing the regulations. They're not even making sure that they're wearing a mask as they go through the turnstiles. And yet most of them, when they go through the turnstiles with a mask on, they'll take them off on the escalator. If they can wear them at the turnstile, then why can't they wear them for the rest of the journey? Because most of them are arrogant and they have no respect for anyone outside of their own community. And this is what gives the BAME community a reputation for being insolent, arrogant, and quite frankly, stupid. They can't follow the rules that everyone else is following. A lot of the time I think they actually want to not follow the rules because they want to stand out. And then they have problems with being segregated. Can't have it both ways, BAME community. If Black Lives Matter, then you should be wearing masks, because otherwise you're affecting black people as well. If Black Lives don't matter, end the campaign. Go and break the rules, and we'll see if the police start arresting people next year, when we start hitting 250 to 500,000 people dead. It's a long way off from the 2 to 3 million that I estimated, or 2.5 million that I estimated. 1.75 to 2.5 million I estimated about 12 months ago. It's all on my diary entries. But it will be getting there. By the end of this year, it will be getting there, if no action is taken. Despite this antivirus, the vaccine that's rolling out, by the time they start rolling it out, we've done 600,000 so far. I think the virus would have mutated to an extent that the vaccine won't work on it. Because it's very difficult to get an antiviral for a strain of virus, because it mutates and changes so often. That's why we haven't got an AIDS vaccine yet. Because the AIDS, thankfully, AIDS is acquired only on contact. But can you imagine if we had a virus that was like AIDS but was airborne and would stay on surfaces for 72 hours, maybe 3 weeks, some people are saying. If we had a strain of HIV that was as transmissible as COVID-19, would people have different agents? Is it because most people see it as a bad flu? It is a sort of flu-ish thing, but it's not a flu, people. It's not a heavy cold. It's a respiratory infection. It affects your lungs. Even if you survive, your lungs are damaged. In a lot of cases, there's a post-COVID-19 syndrome where your lungs are damaged and you have breathing issues for life. So my plea to the BAME community is stop being arrogant, stop being disrespectful, follow the rules that everyone else is following, lead by example. Those leaders in the BAME community lead by example. A face mask covers the face, not your chin, not just your mouth, your face, your nose and mouth. It's not a matter of, well, I don't think it works. It's the law. Don't stand out by breaking the law, by breaking statutes, by disrespecting people's possessions, disrespecting property, by breaking COVID restrictions, by group gatherings in central London. Tonight will be interesting to see if anyone turns up in central London, and also whether it's mostly BAME community that turn up in central London. Anyway, I think I've said enough for now. Hopefully people will start opening their eyes and seeing what's happening around them, especially people in the media. Because I've heard it on the radio and TV about, well, most people are respecting the law. Well, it's not most people you're talking to. the people you're trying to talk to are the ones that aren't respecting the law and probably aren't watching the news broadcast in the first place because they don't care. They don't really care about each other. This all Black Lives Matter is nonsense. It's just to make white people feel guilty. It's not anything to do with them BAME community members being respected, because they don't respect us. They don't respect the rest of the people outside the BAME community. And if there are a few people that do, thank you very much. But the majority of the ones that I've seen in my little part of the world don't. They have no respect for anyone outside of their own BAME community. If you're not the same skin colour, or you've not got the same attitude towards law enforcement, I mean, how many Jamaicans do you know that don't or have not smoked cannabis? I've known quite a few Jamaicans, and I would say nearly all of them have. Why? It's an illegal substance. Smoking's not good for you, so put the two together. Why are a lot of Jamaicans cannabis smokers? And they don't seem to have a problem with it, and I don't understand why. Anyway, I'm going to love you and leave you. I'll look forward to the comments on this one. If I don't speak to you again soon, or by tonight, then have a good new year, everyone. And I'll see you in 2021.